Would like to call today's meeting of the State Land Board to order. It is April 14th, 2026, and we are an all virtual meeting today. If I want to ask my colleagues if I missed something or go out of step here because we're virtual and I'm a little rusty on that, just raise your hand. Materials online for those of you joining us today. Thank you for joining us. We will start with our consent item at the top of the calendar here, which is approving our minutes from the February 6th, 2026 State Land Board meeting. I'll entertain a motion for that.
Madam Chair, move approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. We have a motion and a second for the meeting minutes from February. Look at you to nod. Any objections to the minutes? Any objections, Madam Treasurer? None? None for mine. Motion passes. Minutes are confirmed. We have we have two action items and a set of informational items later in the meeting here. And we are going to start off with, and we have public testimony ability to be taken for both action items 2 and 3. And I know we will, I think, have some public testimony for 3. So action item number 2 is approving the land exchange for the Lee family and South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve. Director Lovell.
Good morning, Governor, Mr. Secretary, Madam Treasurer. I'm excited to bring to you this morning a land exchange at our South Slough National Estuary Reserve. As you have been aware of, and you will hear later today, there is a really fabulous project happening there at the Visitor Center to improve the safety and accessibility of our walkway and parking lot there, and also making upgrades at the Visitor Center. That has led to an opportunity for us to do a very elegant land exchange between the neighboring landowner. And I am pleased to welcome today Chris Castelli and Patricia Fox, the reserve manager, to present this item to you.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. Good morning, Governor Kotek, Secretary Reed, and Treasurer Steiner. For the record, my name is Chris Castelli. I'm the Deputy Director of the Land Management Division at the Department of State Lands. And as Caitlin mentioned, our South Slough Reserve Manager is online, along with other staff to help, including our most excellent proprietary specialist who worked on this. It's sort of a joint effort from our real property group in Bend. So if you have any questions at the end, I'll be happy to try to answer those. So the issue today is whether the State Land Board should authorize the department to complete a land exchange of a 0.206 acre portion of state-owned land at the current entrance to the Visitor Center of the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve with the neighboring Lee family for a 0.2 acre portion of forested land of equal size. And you see the exhibit is up on your screen right now. For reference, and I think we say this later in the agenda item, 0.25 acres is about the size of your general single family tax lot. I think it's actually literally the size of my tax lot. So the authorities are outlined in your agenda item number 2. The current entrance for the reserve's visitor center is along Seven Devils Road in an area with limited visibility and constrained access for visitors and school buses. South of the visitor center entrance, the neighboring Lee family operates a pallet business utilizing semi-trucks for transport, creating additional traffic safety concerns with shared roadway access. And I think you all have been up to the reserve in your times and seen how thin and windy Seven Devils Road is by itself, and then the sharp turn into the visitor center entrance. The reserve is relocating the visitor center entrance to a new location to improve safety, expand parking capacity, and enhance bus mobility. Construction is underway, and the new entrance road is anticipated to be completed by July 2026. The proposed land exchange involves the existing entrance area and will benefit both the neighboring Lee family and the department by complementing the visitor center access improvements, thereby improving visitor and school bus safety. That's our number 1 bullet and number 1 concern. Reducing traffic conflicts between public access and commercial trucking operations. Resolve longstanding boundary issues. Maintain compliance with statutory land exchange requirements, and result in no net loss of value to the state. On September 7th, 2023, the department received an application to exchange land from the Lee family proposing a partition and trade of parcels of approximately equal value. Under the proposal, the department would trade to the Lee family a land parcel acquired with grant funding from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in 2021. In return, the reserve would obtain a forested portion of the Lee property of nearly equal value. This proposal was discussed at public meetings of the South Slough Reserve Management Commission on June 7th and September 27th of 2023, where it received support. On December 12, 2023, the Land Board initiated the due diligence for the proposed land exchange. Following that approval, the department completed statutory and administrative review steps, including a public notice and comment period, cultural resource assessments, land appraisal, boundary surveys, and other due diligence activities. And that land evaluation form is in your packet as Appendix C. No public comments were received during the comment period, which was held from March 13th to April 12th of 2025. In accordance with statute and rule, land exchanges must be based on equal value. However, both acreages and values of the portions of land being exchanged are very close. Following a survey and appraisal, the Lee family will receive 0.206 acres along Seven Devils Road, including the current paved entrance to the visitor center. The reserve will receive 0.2 acres of wooded land from the northern portion of the Lee property. 0.2 acre is roughly the size of a typical lot for a single family home. And Appendix D shows a timeline of the activities. We've been trying to put those timelines in there so you kind of see the steps that have occurred and the cadence of them. If approved, the department will proceed with a series of county approvals for the lot line adjustment and then opening escrow to close the exchange before the end of the year. With that, the department recommends the Land Board approve the completion of the Lee South Slough Reserve Land Exchange along Seven Devils Road in Coos County. And I believe we have a second slide that also just shows how the parking lot's coming along. And while it was taken recently, I think it's even come along quite a bit more since then. So the visitor center is an exciting project, and we'll talk a little bit about that, I believe, in our annual report later. But it is coming along. With that, any one of us will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks for the photo. I was trying to imagine what was happening here, so it's nice to see the construction changes here. So thank you. Any questions before we go to a motion? I know we've had this item ahead of us, in front of us a couple times, so any questions for staff? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on the item.
Madam Chair, move approval of the staff recommendation and the completion of the land exchange as outlined in the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Second.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any objections to the motion? Watching for nod heads, I see no's. Okay, motion passes, and we will close that action item and go forth and do at the South Slough. So, second item or third action item I think we have today. I'm pulling up my agenda. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Just for the record, we did not have anybody who wanted to offer public testimony on that item, right?
Well, thank you for clarifying, Madam Treasurer. Director, no testimony.
No, there was no one signed
Okay,
up for testimony
I just
on
think
that
it's
item.
important to get that on the record so that nobody thinks we were not. Thank you. I appreciate that, Governor.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Thanks for the check on that. Yep, no public testimony on that item.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I do think we have at least one, and we have some items that we received ahead of time for the next item. Item number 3A, rules for waterway licenses, licenses, and registrations, director level.
Thank
3A.
you. 3A and 3B are presenting today. We're presenting one of our biggest rulemakings in recent years. It updates how DSL manages waterway leases, licenses, and registrations on Oregon's owned waterways across the state. This rulemaking had two important goals. First, to implement the current day best practices to protect the health and safety of these waterways. Sorry, we're all fighting the allergy season here. Which experience serious environmental risks and unexpected financial liability from some private uses on these public lands, some of which have made headlines. Second, to achieve sustainable operations by updating our application fees for leases, licenses, and registrations, as well as compensation rates for leases. We know that financial self-sustainability is one of the key priorities of this board. Current fees don't cover the staff time required to process applications, and current rules have 3 varying methods for calculating lease compensation rates, which creates inconsistencies along the same waterway. Updating the fees and simplifying down to 1 compensation method supports the goal of sustainable operations and fairness. Updating these rules was also important for our Oregon communities. Engagement was high throughout the extensive rulemaking process that was considered and sought to reflect multiple perspectives regarding the public waterways. Oregonians are very invested in that outcome, and that continued through this public comment period where we received 23 written comments and have 1 person signed up to testify. As you know, we intended to have the land board consider these proposed rules in December of 2025. When that draft rule was circulated ahead of that meeting, we heard feedback that we wanted to take the time to address to ensure that this rule was clear and accurate. So before you today, we have the updated proposed rules. The staff who led this project, Dana Hicks and Blake Helm, are here to present the item, and following their presentation, we'll take the public testimony. I will then provide the department's recommendation for the land board's consideration. And with that, I'll hand it off to Dana and Blake.
Thank you, Director. Just announce yourself for the record. Thank you.
Yeah. Good morning, Governor Gotek, Secretary Reed, and Treasurer Steiner. For the record, my name is Dana Hicks, and I'm the department's Planning and Policy Manager for the Aquatic Resource Management Program. And then we have Blake Helm joining virtually.
Good morning, Governor Kotek, Secretary Reed, and Treasurer Steiner. For the record, my name is Blake Helm, and I am the department's proprietary specialist.
Today, we are presenting proposed rules for 2 divisions of administrative rule related to management of waterways. That's Division 82 and Division 145. As the minor changes to Division 145 are related to and dependent on the adoption of Division 82, we are presenting the information jointly. At director level, will make 2 separate recommendations for the land board to consider and take action on. The people of Oregon own the beds and banks of many rivers and lakes in Oregon, including the Territorial Sea. These are shared resources the public may use for navigation, recreation, commerce, and fishing. The Division 82 rules govern how we issue leases, licenses, and registrations for structures and uses in these waterways, like marinas, ports, docks, and floating homes. These authorizations ensure uses don't adversely affect the health and safety of Oregon-owned waterways, and leases also compensate the public for these uses. Through this rulemaking, the department has proposed changes to calculate compensation for waterway leases using a single method rather than the 3 varying methods that are currently used and were causing inconsistencies. We also sought to increase and add application fees to cover administrative costs, and finally to mitigate risk to waterway health using best management practices.
The department considered input from the Rulemaking Advisory Committee, other local and state agencies, tribal governments, and affected parties throughout this rulemaking process. First, invitations went out to all 9 tribes, offering opportunities to consultation and/or participation on the REC. The department did not receive any requests for consultation or participation, but we did reach out again to notify the tribes when the comment period began. No comments were received from tribal staff or other representatives. Next, the department convened a 10-person REC over 5 months. Please note we met 5 times, not the 6 as stated incorrectly in the memo. Discussion was robust, and RAC members provided feedback critical to making the department's rulemaking efforts successful. Among other things, members identified where improvements could be made in the proposed compensation methodology and overall helped to mitigate the financial impact of the proposed rules. The public review and comment period was open for 45 days, and we held 6 public hearings, 4 in person in Florence, Bay City, Bend, and Portland, and 2 virtually. We received 64 comments during this period, some in support and some identifying concerns, which we sought to be responsive to. Many of the comments received expressed concerns with a revised definition of a floating recreational cabin. In response, the department retained the current definition. Some commenters requested that the department memorialize and rule that shear and stiff booms are excluded when calculating square footage for floated recreational cabins. In response, the department included this language in rule. Some comments expressed opposition to increased fees, the methodology used for determining compensation, and an interest in using revenue for waterway improvements. Excuse me. In response, the department highlighted that a portion of revenue is distributed as grants under the Submerged Lands Enhancement Fund, and that meaningful steps were taken by the department to ensure compensation and fees would not be unreasonable, such as ensuring rent does not increase by more than 15% at renewal, maintaining annual rent increases at 3% and not the proposed 5%, and removing some use rate modifiers like zoning, which were captured in the adjacent real market value, and adding other use rate modifiers that reduce the lessee's use rate for circumstances such as providing public access or participating in programs that benefit the waterway, like the Marine Board's Clean Marina program. These changes helped reduce the financial impact to lessees. We received additional input when the public testimony period opened for the December Land Board meeting, which is where we had originally planned to bring these rules. In response, the department removed the item from the December Land Board agenda, which allowed us time to resolve concerns by addressing minor drafting errors that were impacting clarity for uses of recreational cabins, stiff booms, and shear booms, and clarifying that annual application fee increases of up to 5% for leases and public facility licenses will occur at the director's determination each year rather than as automatic increases. Having addressed those concerns, we have brought this action before you today. Switching gears to the second related action proposed, the Division 145 rules govern how we issue authorizations for land subject to remediation and habitat restoration activities. One of the rate methods proposed for removal in Division 82, the non-marine flat rate, is referenced in this division, and so limited amendments are necessary to remove the outdated reference and replace it with a reference to the posted lease rates found on the department's website. These proposed changes were integrated into the public comment and review process held for Division 82 proposed rules. The department did not receive any comments specific to the proposed changes for Division 145. This concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that presentation. Given some of the feedback we've received, and I think I will want to have some discussion before we go to any motions. But before we do have any questions from the board, I would like to make sure that the individual who has signed up to testify has the opportunity to testify. And then also just to point out for folks, we did receive a number of emails on a particular section of this. And so if you haven't had a chance to see those in your packet, they are there. So
we are looking, Governor, Kelly Holtz signed up, but at this point she is not logged on.
Okay.
Do we have Erin? Is she logged on yet? No, she's still not. She did submit written testimony. So maybe what we can do is have a discussion and then see if she's logged on, give her some time.
Yeah, we're moving pretty quickly off the first items. So Mr. Secretary or Madam Treasurer, any you want to start with any questions or?
If I could just make a comment, I really appreciate the amount of work DSL's put into engaging the communities and being meticulous about getting these right. This is an area that understandably people are passionate about because it affects their primarily recreational activities. And that's important because we want to maintain access for these recreational activities. I did not know about duck shacks before all this started, and now I know a lot about duck shacks. And I just want to express my appreciation to everybody involved at DSL for your hard work in engaging the public and really not rushing in, although we'd love to get this done and it's appropriate to get it done to help maintain the department's financial viability. It was important to do it right. So thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to associate myself with the treasurer's remarks. These are detailed things that shouldn't be overlooked, and I'm glad they haven't been. So I appreciate and second what you said, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I also want to thank the department. When the rules came before us originally, everyone took a pause, said we needed more work, more input, changes were made. I appreciate the delineation of the changes that were made in response from December to now, which is, I think, really helpful. I have a question that I just want to understand, and if someone could just walk me through for the number of emails that we received have to do with folks in floating homes. And certainly there's concern about fees going up. If we could get on the record an explanation of how for existing residents, this will affect them, future residents, and any kind of commentary on the concern about attaching value to land property versus floating home property. I will confess I didn't understand that concern. So if someone could explain to me what that's about and how that was taken into consideration. So thank you.
Thank you, Governor. I will turn it over to Blake to answer that question. It was definitely something that received a lot of comments.
Yeah, thank you, Governor Kotek, for that question. So using real market value is, one of the ways the department was trying to build a sustainable program, one that can weather, turnover and loss of institutional knowledge. We use that as that data point as a objective, or rather we use real market value because it's an objective third-party data set managed by trained, knowledgeable staff. Includes many of the factors that were also valuable to DSL when valuing property. But for the record, current lessees, are either going to be subject to the minimum payment of $1,200. But the methodology ensures that existing leases will either see a reduction in their rent or at most a 15% increase upon renewal. New leases will be subject, like I said, to the compensation formula that uses real market value. And since there isn't a previous, lease to look at for, what the lease, the rent was, the annual payment that's calculated will be, based on the square footage requested, the adjacent land value, and then the use rate, which is a percentage and between 3% and 8%, and is determined based on a number of factors that are laid out in rule.
And Madam Chair, if I could just ask one other clarifying question. Mr. Helm, when you testified, when you gave your initial testimony, you mentioned that language around stiff booms and shear booms were included in the rules that you're presenting us today. I will freely admit I have not read through them in detail again. I read through them before the December meeting, but not this time. I had thought we were going to need to do an amendment today about that, and I want to be sure that we do this all correctly. So could you clarify whether we still need an amendment to include stiff booms and shear booms, or whether that is actually, that language is included in all the relevant places in the rules as proposed?
Thank you, Madam Treasurer, for that question. We do have a proposed amendment that we were planning to put forward as a final consideration for the stiff boom and shear boom language. It's one subsection of rule that fails to mention shear and stiff booms, but we should have an amendment queued up after discussion and public testimony.
We do have an amendment queued up. I've got it in front of me. I just wanted to be sure that it was still necessary. I just want to make sure I did everything right.
Yes, Madam Secretary, it is still necessary because there was one subsection of rule, like I said,
That's
that
great.
failed to mention that. So, it would, yeah, so thank you.
That's fine. Thank you. I just wanted to be sure because you don't want to make one doesn't want to make unnecessary amendment proposals. I'm old fashioned that way.
Yeah, and thank you, Blake. And we'll get to that technical adjustment. My understanding that the person who has signed up for public testimony is now with us, and so wanted to give that person an opportunity. And I don't know,
Governor, we should be promoting Kelly Holtz to provide her public testimony.
Ms. Holtz, thank you for joining us. Just feel free to introduce yourself for the record, and we'll limit you to 5 minutes. And please present your testimony. Thank you.
Ms. Holtz, you are muted, at least on my screen.
Can you hear me now? Great.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Governor. I don't think I'll take 5 minutes of your time, but I do have some important comments I'd like to share. So good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Land Board. My name is Kelly Butler Holtz. I am a floating home owner on the Willamette River. I also serve as president of the Waterfront Organizations of Oregon, or WOO. WOO represents Oregon Floating Home Morages, boat morages, and waterfront businesses. And I am here in opposition to Agenda Item 3A, the adoption of the Division 82 rules for waterway leases, licenses, and registrations. My primary concern is the DSL's proposed use of upland real market value as the basis for pricing all submerged land leases. While RMV may be appropriate to value upland property, it does not translate well to submerged lands, which have fundamentally different characteristics, constraints, and uses. Applying upland valuation to submerged land produces results that are not grounded in how these lands actually function in practice. We can already see the consequences of that mismatch. In some cases, lease estimates will increase dramatically, well beyond what can reasonably be absorbed by floating home communities, marinas, and river-dependent businesses. These are not marginal adjustments. They represent a significant shift in the cost of operating on Oregon's waterways. From a public benefits perspective, that matters. Floating home communities provide naturally occurring affordable housing. Waterfront businesses support family wage jobs, and together they are part of Oregon's working waterfront. When lease costs become unpredictable or too high, it puts both housing and local businesses at risk. I want to emphasize that although DSL is our landlord, it provides no services to maintain these leaseholds. That responsibility falls to us. Leaseholders are active stewards of these waterways. We maintain our leaseholds, invest in our infrastructure, and comply with stringent environmental regulations, like the Marine Board's Clean Marina program. I would also like to highlight concerns about the DSL's rulemaking process. The RAC, or Rule Advisory Committee, repeatedly requested basic comparative data. How current leases would translate under the proposed methodology, as well as a fiscal impact analysis, which was one of DSL's stated goals to the RAC. After numerous requests from the RAC, DSL never provided any comparative or fiscal analysis data. Without it, neither the committee nor the public has had a clear view of the full range of impacts. And finally, I want to address the capped lease concept. DSL has proposed a cap of $175,000. That might sound like a safeguard, but it actually highlights the problem. Reaching that cap represents a massive increase for many leaseholders, one that many simply will not be able to absorb. And over time, more and more leases will be pushed up to that same level, regardless of size or use. That's not market-based, and that's not equitable. I respectfully ask the board not to adopt these rules as proposed, but to require the DSL to develop a more transparent, equitable, and defensible approach. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Holtz, for your testimony. Very much appreciate that. Thank you. As someone who used to represent a district in North and Northeast Portland with many floating home communities, I would be curious to know how the agency responds to the concerns that have just been raised.
Thank you, Governor. We do appreciate that many people who participated in this process, whether it was by serving on the RAC or attending a public hearing, submitting comments, or providing testimony today, had some of these same concerns. We sought to be responsive to their concerns and considerations by working towards a fair and reasonable requirement to existing customers, while also seeking to ensure cost recovery, compensation, and use of a public asset that protected the waterway health and safety. So these proposed rules are a part of that collaborative process that balanced those multiple perspectives and considered how each alternative might affect different interests. Our team understood that current lessees wanted to know what these proposed and compensation structures would do to their current leases. And so what we did is we analyzed the proposed changes for a range of lease options and types, and also offered specific lease analysis for any interested lessee. So that was an available service we provided. DSL currently has a total of 3,820 leases, registrations, and licenses, 533 leases, 3,062 registrations, and 225 public facility licenses. So it was a significant number of registrations and licenses and leases that we couldn't do a fiscal analysis for all of them, but we did try to categorize them and offer that general comparison. And I will point out in Appendix D in your packet, we do have a good summary of the difference of proposed fees and compensation structures. And because of the standardization of the real market value as the basis for determining these leases, that is a constant, reliable third-party determination that can create that certainty about the prices, the fairness across all of the leases, so we don't have people next to each other getting different rates. And we also work to not only cap the increase to 15%, so we amortize the amount of increase over time. And then we set that maximum cap, and that cap of total lease will really be for those commercial leases, not for the individual. So we have to really understand that these leases are everything from the duck shacks to the floating homes to commercial facilities like the Port of Portland's facilities. So these costs represent those ranges. And I'll turn it over to Dana to see if she has anything to add.
Yeah, I would just add in, Governor Kotek, thank you for the question. In Appendix D, we do go through the different application fees and annual compensation for different types of structures, starting with small or medium, which are where a lot of the dock and floating homes and floating recreational cabins are. So you can see those fees there. There is an application fee that's reflecting how much administrative costs that the department has to both approve those as well as renew those. We don't have annual compensation for those types of structures. We did make it possible to have a no-cost application for small, low-risk structures, and then the fee limit is a maximum of $1,000 and no minimum. So we do hope that that addresses some of the questions, and I might ask Blake if he has anything additional to add in response.
Yeah, just one item, Governor Kotek. We did provide a summary of around 420 leases that we were able to calculate initially based on the first round of proposed rules to the RAC, which had slight differences in what we ended up finalizing in our compensation methodology. But we were able to show that, at that time, the minimum that folks were paying was around $380, and the median or mean payment was around $942. And that based, on the proposed rules at the time, which allowed for up to 50% increase at renewal, that, we'd see about a mean of $1,200 instead of 942, and some increase. Well, I guess I would say the point is we did provide, like Caitlin said, a range of examples, as well as a large portion of leaseholds that we were able to do a rough analysis of, showing that the increases were going from a mean of 942 to a mean of 1200. So yeah, I would say that's what I'll add. Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask a very quick related question?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, go ahead.
Thanks, Ms. Hicks. Mr. Helm, I'm sure it's in the appendix, but I'm just not seeing it. Can you remind me when these fees were last updated or increased?
They were last updated, I believe, 11 years ago. Well, really now 12 since of the delay. So it's been a very long time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Madam Treasurer.
thank you. Y'all know I served as budget chair for 6 years when I was in the legislature. And this issue of fees obviously was a big one that we dealt with, both when I was chairing subcommittees and when I chaired the full committee. I am absolutely sympathetic to people who pay these fees. And I get the concerns that Ms. Holtz raised about housing costs and stability and the question of comparability between submerged lands and upland lands. And yet, like everything else in state government or in government in general, things like this have to be maintained through a balance between general funds that come to agencies or the state in a variety of ways that are not specific to fees, and user fees, right? We see this, for example, with our state parks, where some years ago we implemented day use fees for some of the most popular parks. We're still paying for parks with lottery dollars so that everybody has access to them, but some parks have a small day use fee associated with them. So I want to reiterate that there is no such thing as a perfect rulemaking process. There is no such thing as a rulemaking process that gets everybody to be happy and sing together in perfect harmony. But this was I've seen a lot of rulemaking processes, as have my colleagues on this board, come and go. And this was a very thorough and extended one, including the delay from approving these in December to waiting until now to make further adjustments based on more feedback that the department received. So when I vote in support of making these changes, which I will be doing, I will do so cognizant of the impact it has on certain holders of these leases, and cognizant of the fact that every dollar that isn't paid by a user is a dollar that comes out of the Common School Fund. The Common School Fund, in turn, supports K-12 education, and that is obviously a priority for the members of this board as well. And it is, in fact, our fiduciary responsibility as members of the Land Board. So I just want to put those thoughts on the record, and I thank you for allowing me to do so, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer.
Governor, if I may, I want to keep us on time. So let me just wrap up. The examples that Blake shared of how the proposed fees are responsive to cost concerns highlight our efforts to find middle ground between no charge at all and an extremely impactful surcharge. Everyone involved in this rulemaking genuinely sought workable solutions, and I'm grateful for that. Two that we haven't discussed, I want to point out in response to the Secretary's comment about timelines. We also want to point out that the effective date of this is not until July of 2027, so 14 months away. That allows us a lot of time to do outreach, education, update our technical systems, our internal processing systems, so that this there'll be a lot of awareness moving into these actual fee increases. These are not going to hit this summer. The other, in response to Ms. Holtz's testimony about caretaking of the leaseholds, we are adding a flat fee of $100 to these applications for the Submerged Land Enhancement Fund. That works as a grant program. In fact, we just recently closed, I believe, the current solicitation. So anybody can apply for those to help maintain and care for the waterways. So while we also have the ADV program, and I just wanted to make sure that folks are aware that DSL is in fact contributing to the overall well-being of the waterways around these leaseholds. Blake, I'm going to keep us on time and move to the amendments. Thank you.
Actually, I'm not ready to move on to the amendment.
Okay. Sorry, Governor.
That's all right. Mr. Helm, did you have something you wanted to add? I saw your hand go up.
I just wanted to say that the Submerged Lands Enhancement Fund grant is actually still open up until April 30th. So this is a nice plug. If you have if you have a project, please, reach out to me and we can talk about eligibility, but it is still open until April 30th.
Thank you. So, as I was listening, I was also rereading some of the appendices. So, I think it was important to point out that if these changes in rule are approved today, they do go into effect July 1 of 27. So thank you for clarifying that, Director. The folks in floating homes in particular, it's a very unique housing arrangement. You have the people who run the mortgages and they charge the folks who have homes. And then this is leased to the actual parcel, is my understanding as well, within because the leaseholder or the owner of the ability to be on that water is usually the people who run the mortgages, not the individual homeowners. So there's a whole level of fees, and it's a very, just for everyone's edification, it's a very interesting part of very unregulated from a landlord-tenant position. So I like how fees and how costs for the folks who live there. It's a very interesting arrangement. I'm still noodling on the adjacent land value issue. Of why I understand we need a baseline in an objective category. I would just say that we might want to consider continuing to look at that. I share the treasurer's comments that costs need to be managed, and because they come from the Common School Fund, if we don't have some resources coming in to do these things, that is true, and I support that. And as I'm reading this is a very complicated way of calculating this. And so I think that education over the next year is going to be important. But I would argue we might just want to have a little side conversation about the adjacent land value piece for the homeowners. And does that totally make sense? Because my understanding is the rates are based on that. There's an interesting calculation in the appendices. And given the nature of that residential lot, I'm not sure it's totally appropriate to take that as a complete baseline, but I also understand that's what we have in front of us today. So I just want to put out to the team, we might want to think about that as it relates to the floating home owners themselves, not all the folks who might actually be managing the ability to be on those waterways. So, and I'm glad to hear that one-time fee is going to go towards improvement, because I think what you're hearing from the folks who live in those floating homes, the state does not provide really any support for improvements. That all comes through the mortgage owners and the fees that they pay for the docks and whatever. Now, it's good that we're going to have some money coming in to help with the improvement of the waterways, and I think we should continue to support that, because I do think that's something that is assumed someone's taking care of it, but is actually not happening. So we need more of those types of grants. So I'm glad that we'll have some additional money going into those grants. So I just wanted to put those comments on the record. Now, at this point, we have 3A and 3B. The amendment is to 3A or 3B? Just for
Thank you,
clarity.
Governor. In the spirit of the continuous responsiveness, we're actually going to offer a small amendment to 3A to OAR 14180-082 for the
Okay,
land board
So I
consideration.
should take a motion on 3A before we take for an amendment.
Yes.
So I'm open for an amendment on 3A.
So the amendment we're offering is to consider adding language to the list of excluded structures in OAR 14182-0335 subsection 1 subsection D to explicitly exclude stiff and shear booms from the calculation of square footage for floating recreational cabins.
So I'm sorry, I didn't, was that the amendment or the underlying?
That
motion?
is the
that's-
basis of the amendment. I believe the treasurer has the specific language.
Madam Chair, I think we need to
Sorry.
have the motion
Yes.
on the main, yeah, okay.
Correct.
And
We
then
need-
I'll make a motion for the
Motion.
amendment. We'll vote on that and then we'll go back to the original.
So the recommendation on 3A is on page 4 of the agenda item. So let's do the underlying motion first. Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Mr. Secretary?
No, I was not seeking recognition. I was just tracking the back and forth there.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, but would you like to make the underlying motion for?
Oh, I see. I see. Okay. Madam Chair, I move that the land board permanently adopt the proposed rules from 141-082 and accept that recommendation.
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary and Madam Treasurer. And just to also clarify, if adopted, the proposed rules will go into effect on July 1 of 2027. So that is the motion in front of us for 3A. So before we move on to further consideration of that, there is an amendment, Madam Treasurer.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I move that the land board add stiff booms and shear booms to the list of structures that would be excluded from the square footage calculation for registration fees for floating recreational cabins, so that OAR 141-082-0335 sub 1D reads $1,000 for a floating recreational cabin less than 1,500 square feet. Measurement excludes calculation of pilings, dolphins, mooring buoys, protective booms, stiff booms, and shear booms.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So this is a clarification in the rules regarding that. Any discussion on that? Any objection to that amendment to the underlying motion? Not seeing any. The motion is amended to make that amendment to the rules that have been presented as stated. So thank you very much. So we're now back to the main motion with that amendment regarding 3A. Any discussion? I've made my comments already prior to the motion. So any objections to the motion?
See.
Seeing none, motion passes. We'll move on to 3B.
Excellent. Thank you. For item 3B, the department recommends that the land board permanently adopt the proposed rules for OAR 141-145, rules governing the management of state-owned submerged and submersible lands used for the remediation and habitat restoration activities. If adopted, these proposed rules will also go into effect July 1, 2027. These are conforming rules with Division 82.
Right. They're in a separate motion because there's some technical things we need to do. So thank you for that. I entertain a motion on that.
Madam Chair, move approval of the recommendation and the permanent adoption of proposed rules.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Second,
Second, thank you, Madam Treasurer. We have a motion and a second on adoption of the recommendation on action item 3B. Are there any objections? Any objections? Seeing none, motion carries. 3B is adopted. Thank you very much, everyone. That is, those are our action items for today. We're now moving on to informational items. Starting with DSL's legislative update, number 4.
Sorry. Thank you very much. We had a very productive legislative session, and we have a short update for you, which will be presented by Government Relations Manager Ellie Fornes.
Good morning, Governor Kotek, Secretary Reed, and Treasurer Steiner. For the record, my name is Ellie Fornes, and I am DSL's Government Relations Manager and Tribal Liaison. And I'm going to walk you through our legislative update for the short session this morning. The department tracked a total of 73 bills during the 2026 short legislative session that were predicted to have a direct or indirect impact on our work. As the session came to a close, only a small handful of bills made it through the legislative process in a form that will require any implementation at DSL. Excuse me. So I'm going to share a couple of significant bills of note this morning, in a more comprehensive list of all the bills that impact DSL can be found in the memo related to this item. Starting with House Bill 5203. This was the short session fee ratification bill, which facilitates legislative approval of administratively adopted fees for various agencies. DSL had one fee ratification included in this year's bill. This fee is for divisions 141-085, 089, 090, and 093, which adjusts multiple fee formulas supporting the removal fill program, including general authorizations, tier 1, 2, and 3 removal fill permits, wetland delineations and on-site determinations, permit renewals, and in-water work variances. This 2026 fee ratification is the final step in closing out a process that you've been along for the ride with us, which started with House Bill 2238 in the 2023 session that directed DSL to update these fees via legislation. DSL's updated removal fill program fee schedule took effect January 1, 2026. Next is House Bill 4020, which requires DSL, the Department of Environmental Quality, Department of Energy, and Department of Geologic and Mineral Industries, or DOGAMI, to specify the authority justifying the denial of a permit application and provide the applicant a guide on how to contest a denial. So this relates to the removal fill permits. The bill also requires these listed agencies to develop a key performance measure, or a KPM, in the agency budget to measure the timeliness of permit and permit renewal processing and issuance. Good news is that DSL already provides a lot of this information when denying removal fill permits. It's part of our ordinary course of business. And we do also have a set of KPMs tailored to reflect metrics for this program. So adding in these additional specifications to our processes will require a minor effort. Next is Senate Bill 1590, which prohibits public bodies from assisting the federal government with privatization of certain federally owned lands. This prohibition sunsets on January 2nd, 2032. DSL worked with the bill's sponsor to secure an amendment to this legislation, ensuring that no barriers will exist as DSL continues their ongoing work to acquire federally owned in lieu lands owed to the state of Oregon from statehood. So we got an amendment to fix that concern. House Bill 4097 is simple. It authorizes the Oregon Ocean Science Trust, the OOST, to create and maintain a nonprofit organization. DSL provides administrative support for the OOST, but the trust is responsible for setting up and managing the nonprofit. And last but very not least is House Bill 4084, which establishes the Joint Permitting Council. The council will administer a fast-track permitting program supporting economic prosperity in Oregon. DSL will have a seat on this Joint Permitting Council, and participating agencies are directed to publish a catalog of permits relating to economic development projects later this fall. For DSL, this work applies to the removal fill permit for development in Oregon's wetlands and waterways. This concludes our 2026 short session update, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Ellie. Any questions about the ledger agenda? No, Mr. Secretary, Madam Treasurer. Thank you. Just one comment. Thank you for the clarification on House Bill 4020. I will say when I was signing 4020 and 4021, I was a little perplexed, perhaps, of how this was going to be implemented, because there's no fiscal impact on either one of these. And so what I'm hearing is these are things that we already have underway at DSL and shouldn't require any significant amount of staff time to meet the requirement.
Yes, Governor Kotek, thank you for the comment and question. That is correct. DSL was approached as the language for both of those bills actually were being developed in the interim, and shared that in particular to 4020 that this agency already does that work. And the sponsor of the bill decided to leave our agency in, even given that information. But that means it's not going to cost us anything. And I believe that any agency that would have had a fiscal, that put a fiscal on that bill, was removed from the bill.
That's helpful to know. Well, I do think it's important that there is as much transparency as possible and availability of information when folks are denied a permit and what the process is. And then also the other bill, which is, how what's happening with the different rulemaking processes and things like that. So, I see the value of that transparency, and it's good to know that we already had a lot of that already underway at the state lands. Because people need to know, basically what the process is. I mean, this is process transparency, which is something we can all support. So thank you for the clarification on that. Any other comments or questions about the legislative update? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, which is our update on the DSL strategic plan progress.
Yes. This next informational item is just the annual update on our strategic plan progress report. This item in particular is significant for me because a good strategic plan really inspires you to be part of its mission, vision, values, and goals. And DSL strategic plan certainly inspired me as I was seeking this job. It really made me want to be a part of DSL. I'm excited to be building from such a strong foundation as we begin to work on this updated plan, on our next updated plan. And we'll seek to contribute even more by incorporating statewide priorities like climate resilience and housing. Allie Ryan Hansen, my chief of staff, is here to provide this year's report highlights. Allie's online.
Director, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Just introduce for the record.
Will do. Good morning. Good morning, Governor. Good morning, Treasurer Steiner. Good morning, Secretary Reed. For the record, my name is Allie Ryan Hansen. I'm Director Levels Chief of Staff. My pronouns are she, her. And we've got some slides for this item, and I'm hoping those will be popping up on the screen shortly here. While we're waiting, I will tee up the report. So these results reports are how we show you and Oregonians the progress we're making toward our 4 inspiring strategic goals. We make progress by completing projects and by tracking measurable performance objectives. Awesome. Thank you, Ted. And I am ready to go to the next slide. Great. Today I'll offer highlights from the report. Oh, will you go back one? Sorry, I'm still on slide 2. Thank you. And thank you for what is sure to be extreme patience with me saying next slide throughout this presentation. So today I'll offer a few highlights from the report. The full report is in the meeting packet, and it includes an overview of the strategic plan structure and provides project status and performance on measurable objectives. I'm focusing today on the measurable objectives. I do want to note that our program teams are really focused on completing a handful of projects for each strategic goal. We want to get the work that's in progress across the finish line. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the current, ongoing, and completed projects. The report details what these projects are for each strategic goal. So now I'm going to talk through high-level progress objective results for each of our 4 goals. I'll then hand it back to Director Level to discuss our upcoming strategic planning process. Next slide, please, Ted. First, exceptional service. The projects in this goal area are tied to outcomes of improving service, increasing access to services, increasing awareness and understanding of our work and services, and supporting staff. Next slide. This goal has 3 objectives: one we met, one we improved on, and one we did not meet. We met the objective for continuous improvement in reaching the people we serve. The number of people reached via our website, social media, and email lists increased for 100% of communication channels. A key factor in this result is communications and program teams working in partnership to offer relevant, engaging information and professionally managed communication channels. We improved on the metric for purposeful and proactive communication, which measures the percentage of programs with a current communications plan. The Waterway Stewardship Program now has a communications plan along with South Slough Reserve. A key factor here is developing and implementing comms plans for projects has been the focus for comms capacity, along with the comms-led strategic projects like website design. Finally, we did not meet the continuous improvement in customer satisfaction objective. This objective is measured by continued progress toward a 93% satisfaction target for the 6 indicators that all state agencies survey customers on. We conduct our survey every other year, so these results are from summer 2024, and we have another survey coming up in summer 2026. None of the indicators increased from 22 to 24. I want to flag 2 considerations for this objective. First, this is the exceptional service goal. A 93% satisfaction rating would truly be exemplary. While we do, as director level would say, want to be A+ students, for most service sectors, ratings like these are quite good. They're good with room for improvement, which brings me to consideration 2, which is that we got really valuable information from the 2024 survey scores and comments. So that customer satisfaction data, along with service delivery data, help shape our 25-27 budget focus on restoring core services, particularly through adding key positions. As we grow capacity, both through staffing and improvement, customer satisfaction, particularly timeliness, will remain an important indicator. Next slide. Next up, Thriving Oregon. The projects in this goal are tied to outcomes of enhancing and increasing stewardship of lands and waters and increasing opportunities for students and teachers. Next slide. This goal has 4 objectives, 3 we met and 1 we did not meet. I'll start with the objective we did not meet, which is no net loss of wetlands. When we add together things like wetland gains, voluntary restoration projects, when we add together wetland gains, which come from things like voluntary restoration projects or mitigation banks, and wetland losses from things like permitted impacts or enforcement actions, there was a net loss. There is a lot of complexity that underlies that seemingly simple math. For example, gains from mitigation banks are counted in the year a bank is built. A wetland loss that's mitigated with credits from that bank is counted in the year the project removal fill permit is issued. So when we look at gains and we look at losses, what we see is the need to examine both how are we protecting wetlands and how we measure how wetlands are protected. And we'll be putting many heads together to do that.
Madam Chair, before Ms. Ryan Hansen goes on, can I just ask a clarifying question? I understand at some level why you measure losses and gains at the times that you do, but presumably even when a permit's issued, it doesn't necessarily happen the work doesn't happen the second the permit is issued, right? There are a lot of other steps that need to be taken before these projects occur, and DSL's permit may or may not be the last step in this. And so as you think about this a little bit more, I'd be grateful for figuring out ways to do a better job of matching, because I think it would help me understand, as one of the stewards of these lands, how we think about this question and whether we're actually doing a good job keeping up, because we don't know how long the delay is in implementing the mitigation strategy, right? And I don't want to see unreasonable delays, or if there's a way to match in table format, permit was issued for this project, then work started here and the mitigation occurred at this time, was completed at this time, that might accomplish the same goal and provide that as an appendix when you do these reports. That might be helpful. I just have thought, and y'all leave it to the department to figure out, but you understand my concern.
Absolutely. And thank you, Treasurer Steiner, for that thought.
Yeah, and if I would tag on to that, I think really appreciate that feedback from the treasurer. I do think, and I'm glad the team's going to go back and think about this objective, because I always have lots of question of not every wetland is the same. And I think the timing issue and understanding, like, because I think any are going to be like, we don't want to lose wetlands. And what are the contexts of each one? What are the mitigation efforts? Like, I assume there's some report somewhere that gives us a deeper understanding of this. So I'm glad you're going to continue to look at this. I remember when this was on the plan, when I think this is the first year I was doing this, and it was like, I get what we're trying to do there, but context is going to be important to understand that. So thanks for, this part of the reason we have plans is we set goals. We don't always reach all those goals, and we continue to analyze how we can reach the overall objectives, even
Yeah.
if how we quantify it doesn't quite capture it or we're not hitting that mark. So I always think of these things as a work in progress, even though, we want to show how we're making progress, but then there's always work to do. And I think this one's an obvious one. So.
Yeah, that's right, Governor, and thank you for that thought. And I'm going to zoom out quickly and just reflect a little bit on that big picture. This is the 4th year of this plan, and we've learned a lot in implementing it. One of the things that we've learned is, what makes a good metric. You want it to be meaningful. You want it to be meaningful to your mission. You want it to be easy to understand, and you want to be able to move it with the strategic work. So, because, as you pointed out, it tells us what's working and what's not, and where we can do better when we need to. So, as we look ahead, when director level talks with you about what's coming up for our strategic planning process, what we measure and how is going to be a really important part of that conversation. And we have learned a heck of a lot, from this metric and from others that have been challenging in other ways to see what are we making happen, what are we not making happen, and how are we going to use that information. So that is protection of wetlands, the objective for protection of wetlands. So the other three objectives for Thriving Oregon, we met. The climate change and wildfire objective, which is here on the left of the screen. What we're measuring here is continuous investment in research projects and practices. Are programs taking the actions they've identified? The answer to this question has consistently been yes, in part because the actions are integrated into program management and project plans. That is a lesson learned. We are consistently seeing strong performance where we have integrated metrics into work. So the results for each program are shown there on the left. And then next up is the increase in people served annually at South Slough Reserve, which was resoundingly met. Factors affecting this result include partnerships with education providers, marketing programs to a wide audience, and expanding capacity for public programming through efforts like growing internship and volunteer programs. Touching back to the earlier approval today of the land exchange, I think having school buses easier to turn around, like that sure will support this when you bring more kids in on school buses. Next slide.
Before you go, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Treasurer, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. One of the frustrations that I had when I was in the legislature a lot is that agencies didn't always coordinate efforts together. And the work that DSL is doing, not necessarily directly because you're funding projects, that other people are doing, but I'm curious about coordination with ODF, with OSFM, the State Fire Marshal, and with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, since all of those 3 agencies have some overlap in mission with what you're talking about here. And one would hope that you could leverage work off of each other and get more bang for our buck, right? So I wonder if not in this meeting, then in another meeting, it might be useful to have some kind of a presentation either from you all or jointly between some or all of those agencies, or maybe there's others that I haven't thought about, to talk about this issue, because I do think we ought to be leveraging efforts.
Thank you, Treasurer Steiner, for that. And what that made me think of is the work that we're doing on the climate executive order. State agencies are putting together their project implementation plans now, and forming collaborative committees for implementation on the key pieces of that order. And one of the conversations is metrics, like how do we, as individual agencies and together as agencies, look at what work are we doing and how do we measure that to move the needle toward the executive order. So I think a lot of that work is going to come not only from that, which we are going to weave that EO into our strategic planning, but as agencies seek to collaborate more closely. And I think we'll be really excited to talk with you all about that executive order on an ongoing basis, because there's going to be some really cool things coming out of that collaboration.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor.
Okay, next slide. Thank you, Ted. Finally, we met the objective to provide and promote stewardship tools. This is a good time to mention that if an objective has multiple indicators and half or more are met, we count it as met. So in this objective, the unique number of tools and resources for stewardship decreased. This is largely due to a big push in 2024 to do outreach to local governments regarding wetland land use notices and planning. Actions to promote stewardship tools and resources increased with having communications plans for projects and ongoing engagement via social media as factors there. Next slide. Supporting schools has a single outcome, increasing net revenue for the Common School Fund. Next slide. This goal has one objective that incorporates all the department's 5 key performance measures related to revenue. And here again, we consider the objective met if we meet more than half. We did not meet, but we improved on performance in this objective in 2025. Some brief highlights here. We met targets for annual increase in deposits to the Common School Fund and percentage of South SLU operations funded by sources other than the Common School Fund. Those are the check marks there on your screen. South SLU's 2025 result is their strongest yet, 68% funded by other sources. Their annual report is coming up, and I don't want to steal any thunder, so I'll simply say the team did really tremendous work in securing large grants for restoration and construction projects, and we always recognize the unpredictability and variability of many funding types. And then a key factor in the increased deposits metric was an increase in unclaimed property held in the Common School Fund. So shout out to your team, Treasurer. And side note, checking to see if you have unclaimed property is both easy and fun at unclaimedoregon.gov.
It's just to be clear, it's unclaimed.oregon.gov.
Unclaimed.oregon.gov. Thank you.
And thank you for the shout out to my wonderful trust property team, because they are rock stars.
They are rock stars, and I, was inspired I checked not only for my name, but the names of my entire family. And my brother-in-law he has some property to claim. So hooray for the unclaimed property program.
Ali, I just have a question on
Oh,
this one. So,
yes, Governor.
there's always a little bit of an art also to figuring out what your target should be. So good to see that we're increasing the cash deposit in the Common School Fund. The last 2 items, are something we just need to wrestle with. Like, we need a stretch target, but is that too much of a stretch target? And what is our historical baseline here? Because so many of these things rely on other factors we can't totally control. And so you never want to have targets that aren't, you're not trying to meet targets by making targets too easy, but are these realistic targets? I don't even know. So
that's right. And that's right, Governor. And I think what we're thinking about too here is, in making sure that we can see, like, should we be thinking about what indicators, like daylighting what indicators go into some of these because, you know, you can work really hard to reduce your expensive, but if you have a tough revenue year, that may obscure how hard you worked to reduce expenses or vice versa. So it's definitely an art. And, you know, we're thinking about that as well as we move into the next strategic planning process. So the last three indicators, we improved on one and did not meet the other two. For forest revenue, we're tracking percentage of revenue used for operations. We did, however, have a legislatively approved change to this KPM in 2025. It no longer includes expenses and revenue associated with the Elliott. So adjustment and methodology improved results, but we're going to be looking at 26 as the first apples to apples comparison there. And then we did not meet targets for increase in revenue generated by land management activities other than timber harvest, or for percentage of revenues for operations on lands other than forest lands. Revenues decreased 27% from fiscal year 24. Considerations here are really, it was the cyclical nature of many land management revenues. Particularly relevant for this year was lower waterway lease renewal cycles. Some have highs, you have high years, you have low years. 25 is a lower income year than 24 by 1.6 million, just due to how many, when did they get their lease, when is their renewal due? And then a 40% decrease in DSL building rents due to vacancies. That was a $400,000 decrease. That was also a factor here. That revenue performance also affects the final KPM of percentage of revenue used for operations. Fiscal year 25 was 86%, and that's the highest since 2021. Okay, next slide. That brings us to our fourth goal, which is great workplace. The projects in this goal seek to encourage engagement and growth, support work-life balance, and retain and share acquired knowledge. Next slide. On the fourth goal, on the Great Workplace goal, we have one progress objective, which aims to continually increase the overall employee engagement mean score reported in our annual Gallup survey. The engagement mean is the average of the average score for 12 distinct elements of employee engagement. For 25, we saw a slight decline in the engagement mean. Here, you know, what we really want to tell you is that work is underway to use the 25 results to help identify what we want to work on as an agency and what we want to work on at team levels. I'll mention that our response rate went up, and more people responding gives us access to more data that will support us in doing this work. This is my final slide. I'd be happy to answer any more questions that you have, or turn it back to Caitlin to reflect and tee up what's ahead with our strategic planning process.
Thank you, Allie. And I would just say, like, you know, swinging big is a good thing. I also think some of the projects you undertook were very large projects. And so, you know, I think when you have some really big things, I think, you know, you run into some capacity issues. But again, this is a learning process, and really appreciate the forthrightness of the analysis of where we are, and as that leads into the next planning process. So, Director Lovell.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Allie. As I mentioned in introducing this item, we're going to be looking ahead to developing our next strategic plan, which we will be bringing to the Land Board no later than June of 2027. It will keep us looking ahead towards what's working well, but also what we need to work on to serve us well in the future. I'm really interested, and I heard this theme today through here, that it's important that we not only accomplish all that we set out to do, but we also provide the trend data for you to show the continuous improvement. A single year does not a trend make, and I think that was one of the themes in today's comments as well. It'll help us understand and really peel back what we need to work on moving forward. So this will be strategic to demonstrating and allowing the agency to continue to improve how we serve Oregon communities for generations to come. and we look forward to working with you on that. We should be bringing on a consultant. We're in the final stages of that, and we'll anticipate having our process mapped out and in progress by early summer of this year. So Allie will plan on sharing that update in June. Thank you, Allie. Our last item is, oh,
Yeah, any other comments on the strategic plan before we move on?
If I could, oh, sorry, Secretary Reed, you have your turn.
Very short
Okay.
one. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Treasurer. Just was thinking about some of the specific KPMs, and the one in particular was around the notion that the rate was perhaps not the right measure based on where renewals were in the cycle. So it might make sense in that case, and I guess it's the larger point of whether it doesn't, in some cases, maybe it's not an annual rate, but a rolling average or some of those other kinds of points. So very small point, hardly worth making amongst the larger ones, but appreciate it. Thank you.
As
Yeah.
usual, great minds, or maybe great minds. Secretary Reed took one of the points that I was going to make, which is great.
Sorry.
No, I think it's great. It means that the board is aligned, and this is good. But the other point that I would add, and I think it's to some extent been covered. In addition to setting the right targets so that they're good stretch goals but not unattainable, it's also important to set the right number of goals. I was not involved with the last strategic planning process, but from what I understand, it was ambitious. And I just think it's important to focus on making sure we're doing what we're doing already well, and not adding new programs unnecessarily, but on the other hand, not becoming stagnant, right? We always want to be striving to improve what we do on behalf of Oregonians. So as you move into this next process, and I'm sure we'll have further presentations about it between now and when you present it to us, I just hope that you think carefully about having the right kinds of goals and the right numbers of goals.
Agree with that. And just to remind everyone, all agencies are required and to have these strategic plans. And I think they do set that North Star, and how you set them, allows folks to achieve that progress and also move the agency forward. So I think I know it might make sense at some point to have some check-ins with us publicly, like here's what we're considering before you finalize for the final approval. So if there's a midterm kind of like check-in to have on the calendar, before we get to finalization, that's probably a good idea too. Only because you might just have feedback that would be helpful. So
I don't, Madam Chair, if I may, I'm sorry. I don't know if it's normally the process because, excuse me, as I said, I wasn't involved last time, but I would hope that the director and her team consider having individual meetings with each of the members of the land board and our land board assistants through this process to have conversations about what do we hope to see as part of this plan. And then maybe after that midterm presentation, follow on with each of us individually. I'm not trying to add to the workload, but considering that it's our responsibility to approve this, it's probably better to get our input sooner rather than later. And Ms. Lovell is nodding, Director Lovell is nodding her head. So my guess is they were already planning on doing that, unsurprisingly, but I just thought I'd put that on the record. Thank you.
thank you, Madam Treasurer. I think we all agree with that. See heads nodding, so thank you. And with that, we'll move to our last informational item, which is the South Sluice report.
excellent. Thank you so much. And I couldn't agree more with all of those comments. We look forward to engaging with you all on our next strategic plan. I'm very excited to finish off today with our annual report for the South Slough National Estuary Reserve. This will feel very, I don't want to say repetitive, but current, because we just presented this to you at the end of last year because it had been delayed so much. So there hasn't been a lot of time between the last presentation and this presentation, but there has been a lot of advancements and progress at the South Slough. So we do have some really important updates to share with you. I'd like to turn it over to Patricia Fox, our reserve manager, who is here to present this today.
Thank you, Director Lavelle. I'm gonna.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
Patricia and I are gonna. Well, Patricia's here. We're gonna tag team this presentation, and I'm actually glad it comes right after the strategic plan update because Ali showed some positives from the reserve in that, and even a few pictures. I think there are a couple of pictures from South Slough. So, yeah, Ted, can you fire up the president PowerPoint, please?
Oh, and Chris, just state your name for the record since we're on a different item. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor Kotek, Secretary Reed, and Treasurer Steiner. For the record, my name is Chris Castelli. I'm the Deputy Director of the Land Management Division at the department, and joining me today is the South Slough Reserve Manager, Patricia Fox. We are pleased to present the highlights from the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve's work from 2025. As a reminder, the South Slough manages nearly 7,000 acres of natural area, including open water channels, tidal and freshwater wetlands, riparian areas, and forested lands. You can see here a view of last year's Millock Salmon Celebration, which we were honored to be invited again to participate in with our tribal partners as we have in prior years. With we co-steward these lands with our 3 local sovereign tribal nations, the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, the Coquille Indian Tribe, and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. And just for your reference, the canoe in the foreground here, I believe it is the DSL folks. I think it's a combination of South Slough and some of our staff from Salem. Next slide, please. South Slough's core programs center around research, stewardship, and education. Within these core programs, we do a lot. We provide training opportunities to coastal decision makers to help make our coastal communities more resilient. We work with scientists from universities around the globe. We host interns from high school and beyond at the reserve. We also provide stipends so teachers from all around the state can come to the reserve to learn how to incorporate coastal estuary science into their classroom and teach students inside and outside the classroom, at their school, after school, and on field trips. Education classes for all ages are available to the community at low or no cost, from guided hikes to bird watching. Our nearly 7 miles of managed trails are open to the public year-round from dawn to dusk. Next slide, please. We had an uptick in 2025 from the previous year in the following categories. We increased the number of visitors venturing into our visitor center, likely to see the new exhibits, by almost 350 more folks. The number of community programs increased from 164 to 271. Keep in mind, we also leveraged resources from our Friends of South Slough and Judith A. Mogan Foundation to help keep our after-school program, Estuary Explorers program, going after the federal administration cut the AmeriCorps program. The number of volunteers removing invasive species during Saturday Stewarts increased from 119 up from 67, with the assistance from Friends of South Slough helping to coordinate and expand the Saturday Stewarts program. And I do want to give a thanks to the Friends of South Slough group. And I hope it's a model that we would like to have, maybe a Friends of the Elliott at some point. But yeah, they've been great partners that have really helped with a lot of our projects and programs. Now I'm going to pass it back to Patricia to walk you through the report takeaways and upcoming work at the reserve.
Thank you, Chris. Next slide, please. Good morning, Governor Kotek, Secretary Reed, and Treasurer Steiner. For the record, my name is Patricia Fox, and I am the Reserve Manager for the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve. After receiving $3.1 million from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, we completed the second phase of the Wasson Creek Restoration Project. As you recall, the first phase of the project was dominated by a lot of earth-moving work, regrading and contouring the valley and removing invasive species, primarily reed canary grass. In this phase, 199 acres of upland area were thinned and 73 whole trees were specifically placed in water channels to slow flow, connect the floodplain, and provide habitat. 33 nurse cribs, constructed out of log piles to mimic nurse logs, were installed in the tidal area using different design features to further study their effectiveness. Finally, 143-foot-long boardwalk, which you can see in this picture is fully finished now. We just had like a little soft opening, but this is a picture of it as it was being constructed. Will allow the public to view and be immersed in the restoration project. So you can look up to the uplands all the way down into the tidal area of the Wasson Restoration Project. Next slide, please. Every year, educators from all over Oregon are invited to the reserve for multi-day teacher training. In 2025, we decided to do something a little different. We partnered with Teach Climate Summer Institute and others to build the climate-focused curriculum for the year's program. The level of coordination required was a challenge, but staff were able to provide a very rich experience for teachers to learn virtually from experts all around the country that they would not normally have access to, in addition to the hands-on portion of the week. This partnership demonstrated the value of partnering with outside organizations for other programs at the reserve. Next slide, please. In a year of uncertainty and stress due to federal funding concerns, the reserve leveraged resources, completed timely projects, and explored new funding resources. As already mentioned, Estuary Explorers, our after-school program, was able to still run through the year. We also received 2 competitive federal grants to acquire 193 acres of critical habitat for the reserve. And we replaced 2 old pilings that host sensors for our system-wide monitoring program. One of our stations is shown here. This isn't actually one of the ones that was replaced. This is Winchester Creek. But this program provides long-term data on water quality, weather, biological communities, habitat, land use, and land cover characteristics. And it's a really important program and one you're actually going to hear about in a video following this presentation. And it's data that all 30 reserves in the network collect. So it really serves as the foundational data knowledge for all of the reserves in NOAA's network. Next slide, please. This was the hit of the year, the Slewinator. Last summer, a group of high school students worked together to build an uncrewed sailboat. They named it the Slewinator. It was launched by the wonderful crew of the South Brothers about 300 miles off the coast of San Francisco on September 1st. By December, the Slewinator had traveled halfway between Hawaii and Papua New Guinea. In this project, students learned about air and water temperature from the boat sensors, currents, and so much more, while capturing the essence of exploration with this project partnership between the South Slough, Oregon Coast STEM Hub, Charleston Marine Life Center, and Educational Passage. This social media post captured over 10,000 likes and over 200 comments, by far our best social media posting to date. Next slide, please. As for the future, first up, front entrance project, the subject that has to do with the land exchange with the Lees. The $1.6 million procurement, acquisition, and construction front entrance project is well underway. With the financial support of our friends from South Slough, who contributed the 30% cash match for this grant, this project will provide a new turn lane off of Seven Devils Road, more visitor parking, school bus access, security lighting, and a new gate, all of which will provide improved access and safety. This project will wrap up in June. I pulled in this morning and we're already almost done with striping. So it is well on its way. So I'm just very excited for this project. It's on time and on budget. As for number 2, land acquisitions, we are actively working on completing title acquisitions with the current landowners, extinguishing mineral rights, and completing other due diligence items so we can close on acquiring the additional 193 acres important to the reserve for future conservation that I mentioned from those 2 competitive grants that we were successful in acquiring. As for number 3, Wasson Creek, phase 3. So what's coming up for this one? We are prepping for the traditional garden with our tribal partners this spring and summer, and we'll be planting it this fall. Our new trail, which is about 0.3 miles, will be open this summer. So folks may venture down to the new boardwalk that I just mentioned earlier to immerse themselves into viewing the restoration project. The folks you can see here are kayaking in the video are actually near the traditional garden site. This is near the tidal zone because this picture is actually taken after a King Tides event. But we'll have a grand, big opening ceremony probably in spring of next year, once everything is actually named. We're working with our tribal partners on naming the new trail as well as the traditional gardens. So just very exciting overall. Next slide, please. And that concludes our 2025 annual report for the South Slough. In this picture, we have some students from the Oregon Institute of Marine Biology doing some fish seining. We regularly collaborate with them. They're one of our major partners at South Slough, along with many other folks. We do have a video that is about 3 minutes long. I know we're running short on time, but I'm hoping we still have a chance to view it. But I'm happy to answer any questions along with Chris, and I'll hand it over to Director Lovell. Thank you.
Well, let's go straight to the video.
Okay. This is one of 3. We will have 2 other videos, very short videos that we will be sharing with you in time. And this one is focused on science and research. A future video will be focused on stewardship, and another one will be focused on education. Thank you.
Ted is queuing up the video now.
While he does that, I just want to give Ted Bright a kudos for doing an incredible job. Ted is the bearded gentleman who sits in the back, the man behind the scenes. And yeah, I think this meeting's gone fantastic. It's my first remote one. So thanks, Ted. Hopefully I didn't jinx him.
Mr. Castelli.
There you go, Chris. Well, I would just say I can't wait to go in, and we'll wait for the other videos coming up. I can't wait to be there in the spring, to be honest. So look
I
forward.
know, me too. I was just thinking that it'll be great to have our meeting down there, and
It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
South Slough is such an asset for our state. I'm like I was sad that I did not track the voyage of the Sloohinator, so I'm coming to that conversation late, but it makes me so happy. So
yeah, no kidding. I wish I'd known about it too.
You can track it live on the website. I can send you a link afterwards. It's been making a U-turn here off the coast of Papua New Guinea.
Really?
Yes, it's
Interesting.
fascinating. Shout out while Ted is troubleshooting here on the visitor center project. I do want to give a shout out to the project manager for that project, Juliana Robel. She was just recently awarded as part of the Public Service Recognition Week, one of DSL's ambassadors of public service. So hopefully you will get to meet her in person, Governor. She's been doing excellent work down there. Not all of us, but Chris and I and a number of DSL staff are also traveling down to the South Slough on Friday for their science days, where we'll get to roll up our sleeves and actually participate in some of the great work that they're doing down there.
Nice.
It's a
That's
wonderful
fun.
excuse. Hopefully
Trish,
the
what
weather.
year can you kayak? Is that only certain
Oh,
times?
look,
Oh wait, here we go. Video. I'll come back to that question. So go ahead.
The National Estuarine Research Reserve System was born at the South Slough Reserve in 1974. There are now 30 protected coastal sites across the country within this system. Each reserve conducts its own research relevant to the local area, while also monitoring and collecting some of the same data as part of a system-wide program. The system-wide data sets consist of meteorological and water quality data. The data are collected every 15 minutes and are made available to the public in near real time. In addition, the reserves have expanded the system-wide data sets to include vegetation monitoring, sedimentation rates, and water levels to understand how these factors impact our wetlands. The South Slough Reserve has been collecting water quality data for 30 years and vegetation data for 20 years. Long-term data sets are critical as they allow for local, regional and national comparisons to determine trends, identify hotspots, and provide data for restoration, all important for coastal communities. They can also help decision makers and communities plan for flooding and reduce impacts that may negatively affect recreation, tourism, commercial fishing, and port activities, which are all vital to a healthy economy. Here at the South Sioux Reserve, we're restoring 525 acres of the Wasson Valley. Monitoring this restoration project will help us understand how restoration actions may benefit the landscape over time. Incorporating traditional Indigenous knowledge into these projects informs our research and furthers our commitment to stewarding these lands so critical to our local community and to the estuary system overall.
Very cool.
That's awesome. Thank you. Look forward to seeing the other 2 videos.
Well done.
Yeah, great.
Excellent. So any other questions or comments for our team with the South Slough? Thank you for the annual report.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Patricia.
Thank you.
If
Director?
May, Governor, I do have
Yeah,
a couple of
please.
directors' updates
Yeah, go
to
ahead.
get you out of here a couple minutes early. We'll end on a high note. With the strategic plan, I did want to take the opportunity to draw attention to one of our biggest strategic plan projects and where we're at with it. As you know, we've been working for several years on a new administrative system for managing our authorizations and permits, customer communication, and payments. We're really looking forward for this technological upgrade so that we can serve our customers better. Internally, this system is known as OWLS, but to the public, it will be known as DSL Connect. The modernization project is reaching a major milestone and is now shifting from system building into internal testing and training with our staff across the agency. That will be occurring over the summer. These subject matter experts will lead the way during testing, gaining early hands-on experience and helping us refine the system before this launch this November. With support and targeted training, these experts will then help prepare their colleagues and ensure that the agency is ready and confident when we go live. This change will be significant for both our internal work and our customers. Our organizational change management and communication plans are working in tandem to support staff internally and help customers understand what to expect and how to prepare. Specifically, this is one of my major focus areas, is making sure we're serving our external customers. This is a transformative moment for the agency, and we're looking forward to keeping the board as informed as we move forward with these last stages in the lead up to the launch of this year. If it is helpful, we can keep you updated in the future board meetings as well as in our one-on-one check-ins. I'd like to now share with you really exciting news on the Elliott. We were able to we just sold our first timber sale on the Elliott, the first in over a decade. It's a strong one too. We sold 268 acres on March 30th to Sierra Pacific, bringing in just about $1 million. It works out to be $181 per 1,000 board feet, which gives us the momentum that we need to complete the next 30 years. The sale is the result of a restoration thinning in one of our conservation research watersheds, where we're thinning out crowded, same-age Doug fir plantations to make them more like natural forest. This will create space in the canopy, mixing things up, creating irregular densities, which will help our forest grow into something that's more diverse and resilient over time. This will stitch together continuous stands of older, more complex forests and help us provide better habitat for species like marbled murrelet and spotted owls. Healthier older forests are tougher forests with more diverse ecosystems, and they'll be able to better handle the wildfire, drought, and pests, especially as we enter this summer. This kind of restoration work isn't cheap. Thinning these middle-aged Doug fir stands on steep slopes with seasonal wildfire restrictions is costly, in addition to the species protections that we need to incur. The upside, though, is that we don't have to spend the money on replanting or doing a lot of follow-up treatments, so the net revenue to the agency is higher. While it is a different model from how the Elliott has been managed in the past, we anticipate that the finances will balance out over time. The restoration work is a big reason we got the approval of our habitat conservation plan. We're very excited to be implementing that. And it's building the trust and support that we need with the forest so that we can continue testing treatments and advancing other forestry approaches across the rest of the Elliott. This is just a start. We expect several more sales coming along. The next one, I believe, is around. Well, sorry, I won't misquote myself. It's going out as early as this summer, and we'll sell. Also, sorry, said and done, we plan to sell around 35 million board feet by the end of this biennium, which is approved in the biological operating plan. And I will continue to share these updates on the Elliott as we hit big milestones like this one. I also want to share with you some exciting progress on meeting the governor's housing priorities. This month, the Bend City Council approved the master plan for what will become Legacy Village. The proposed Hayden Homes master plan has been signed by DSL and the city. You know this project as our Stevens Road track. This will keep the project moving forward towards closing. The name Legacy Village, which was chosen by Hayden Homes as a nod to the Common School Fund and the long-term impact that this is meant to have on that community. The project is going above and beyond on affordable housing. It not only meets the state requirements set out in House Bill 3318, it exceeds them with an additional 3.8 acres of affordable housing planned on top of the 20 acres being deeded to the city of Bend. There's one more city council approval scheduled for tomorrow, and assuming that goes through and the appeal period wraps up cleanly, we're on track to close the sale shortly after with Hayden Homes. Overall, this is shaping up to be a high impact project for housing in Bend, as well as for the Common School Fund. We are continuing to innovate how we can improve housing and prosperity outcomes and wetland and waterway protections and restoration. As you saw in our strategic plan, striking that balance is a critical one. Oregon has been leading wetland and waterway protection space in the protection space for a long time. And as the Federal Clean Water Act potentially changes to reduce federal protections for wetlands, rivers, and streams, other states are looking to Oregon and our long-established approach as a model to ensure that states are continuing to protect their natural resources and build resilience towards climate change. Yet we know that Oregon's model needs improvement. We are collaboratively working to examine how we do this. Our SHIP work plan, our State Housing Interagency Partnership work plan, includes prioritization of reviewing and processing housing-related removal fill permit applications and the associated processes. We're also promoting the use of the Advanced Aquatic Restoration Plan, the AARP, our own variant of the AARP, which is a tool that local governments can use to work with DLCD to better integrate the removal fill permitting program into their Goal 5 wetlands inventory work. And as a related note, as part of the SHIP work plan, we're pursuing an EPA grant to modernize the development of our wetland inventories to facilitate the land use process. We are partnering with PSU's Institute for Natural Resources on this grant to develop a tool using remote sensing and machine learning to identify and create an inventory of wetlands in the Willamette Valley. This pilot project is intended to facilitate Goal 5 wetland planning and thereby UGB amendments and expansion. This tool will be designed to be scalable and usable in other parts of the state. And I think that's a really important approach. We're taking these pilots to learn so before we kind of launch statewide, and we're seeking partnerships in doing so, that and also within our existing rules and authorities, so we don't have to go through a rulemaking process to do this effort, because that takes time. We're dedicating these innovative pilot projects and aligning them with these funding opportunities to test and refine them before bringing them to scale. This smart approach also allows us to be surgical about where we actually do need regulatory changes. And we want to be responsive to the realities of what communities need to thrive now and to be resilient in the future. With that, I will conclude the DSL agenda today.
Madam Chair, a 10 or 20 second comment, if I might.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, colleagues. I just wanted to share. I had a chance to be in the Elliott last week with Darren and the other Caitlin, and it was really gratifying to see that the work there. That team in particular was really energizing as they described what was happening and being able to see trees marked and the actual tangible progress that we've all envisioned for a long time starting to happen. So kudos to your team. It was great to see. Looking forward to more of it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And thank you for those updates. All good stuff going on. Really appreciate that. Madam Treasurer, anything else from you? No? Well, with that, I think that brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you. That was a great meeting, and really appreciate all and way to handle a virtual meeting, everyone. Good job, team DSL. And with